XC, menadžment, XC, menadžment. Naučit ćete što je menadžment, o razvoju ideje upravljanja i organiziranja, koji su ključni elementi menadžmenta, koja je uloga menadžera u ekonomiji. Prvi, menadžment ili upravljanje. Jedan od ključnih čimbenika koji se mora uspostaviti prije nego što se odluči o proizvodnji nekog dobra jest način organiziranja cjelokupnog poslovnog procesa, kao i nekih njegovih dijelova. Te aktivnosti na sebe najčešće preuzimaju vodeće osobe nekoga poduzeća. Vlasnici, direktori, predsjednici uprava, a zajednički se nazivaju menadžmentom. Utemeljitelj ideje menadžmenta bio je Henry Fayol, koji je prvi istaknuo njegovu važnost unutar gospodarskog subjekta, definirajući ga kao niz međusobno povezanih zadataka i funkcija. Menadžment, upravljanje, je proces organiziranja, koordiniranja, reformiranja, usavršavanja i funkcionalnog upravljanja nekom tvrtkom, ustanovom ili drugom organizacijom spajanjem pojedinaca različitih vještina i znanja. Cilj menadžmenta optimalno je uređenje proizvodnoga ili drugoga procesa.
Henry Fayol, or Henri in the French, is a big name in the classical management area of organizational studies, the administrative science area. In 1949, his book was published in English, General and Industrial Management. Fayol was a French engineer by training, and when he looked around at the tail end of the Industrial Revolution, he saw a great need for a systematic approach to train managers. He saw these large organizations, and they needed managers with high levels of managerial competence. So he offered his perspective to get the conversation going. He wrote in his book, "It is a case of setting it going, starting general discussion. That is what I am trying to do by publishing this survey. And I hope a management theory will emanate from it." And it certainly did. And if at times, by the way, when you're reading this book and listening to this lesson, you feel like these terms all start to sound the same and even overlap a little bit, you probably wouldn't be the first person to say that. So he's laying it down, but his book is by no means meant to be the end of the discussion, just the beginning. So we're going to sort through the activities of industry that he explains in his book, the managerial activities or functions, and then the general principles of management.
You want to learn new data skills because your job, but you don't have time to learn new data skills because your job. With DataCamp, you can learn any new data skills fast, from beginner stuff like ChatGPT to AI, SQL, and Power BI, all in a fun environment that feels like a game. Like, for real though. The courses were created by experts who use real-world coding problems, so you can get right to the good stuff. Learn new data skills fast with DataCamp.
Hey guys, yesterday I was watching this short video and it just blew me away. I was totally inspired and I wanted to share it with you, so take a look.
If you're a teenage girl living almost anywhere in rural Africa, your ability to go to school is entirely dependent on where you go to find water. I'm currently in southern Malawi with my new friends, Betha and Bethia, and we're walking to their water source. Both Betha and Bethia are averaging 2 days a week at school because of this responsibility. Taxi! This is a dry riverbed, and women and girls come here, dig down into the sand deep enough that they can get a little bit of water to cool at the surface.
Fail saw 6 activities of industry. These are the general or overarching activities it takes to run an organization. First is the technical, that means the production and the manufacturing concerns. Second, commercial, that's the buying and the selling and exchanging of goods and services. Third, financial, that's where you search for and use capital or money optimally. Fourth, security, that's the protection of property and people. 5, accounting, that's the balance sheets, the costs, and keeping track of all that. And 6, which was his real area of concern, was the managerial activity. That means the planning, organizing, command, coordination, and control. When Fail looked at the overall organization's hierarchy, he saw that these activities played out in different proportions depending upon where you were. For example, at the very bottom of the organization, you had what he called the workmen. And they didn't need much managerial knowledge because they didn't do that much, but they needed a lot of technical knowledge in addition to some security concerns and accounting knowledge to keep track of things. Somewhere in the middle of the organizational hierarchy, you had the head of the shop. Today would this probably be like the head of a department or a middle-level manager. And this person obviously needed more managerial knowledge and competence than a frontline worker, a little less technical, but they also needed to be concerned with things like the financial side, the security side, and accounting side. So you can see here that the managerial activity is expanding as we move up the hierarchy, and some of the other areas are shrinking a little bit. By the time you got up to the top dog, he called it the manager. Nowadays, we might say the president or CEO. This person was doing a lot. The lion's share was managerial activity. They needed other knowledge as well, though. They needed to be involved in technical, commercial, financial, security, and accounting, but in lower levels proportional to the managerial responsibilities. And this is where Fail saw the gap. He saw very little training that was systematic. They would train people up in how to become better managers. Fail broke these management activities, this managerial competence, down into 5 main areas that we will look at. This is a list you're going to see in a lot of textbooks. The first is planning. Managers needed to look ahead and chart a course for the organization. They also needed organizational skills. They needed to select and arrange people in the best way possible. They needed to be in command. That meant they were overseeing things. They needed to lead and then stay out of the details. They needed that big picture point of view. Coordination was another important responsibility. They needed to harmonize and facilitate the work between and among the different departments in their organization. They also had to maintain control. They were to ensure compliance on all those other areas like accounting, finance, technical, and quality control. These management activities get at the big picture ways that managers were going to be spending their time. Fail also outlined the principles of management, and we would normally see this in a textbook in a list of 14 items. And this had to do with a little bit more of the microscopic level, like what did management look like day to day? And there were no hard and fast rules. He considered these principles that were not meant to be rigid. They were meant to be flexible depending upon the situation that the manager faced. The first is division of work. That's the task specialization. This is meant to increase productivity, where each person got a very small task and they got good at it. The second is authority and responsibility. In other words, the manager has the right to give orders and exact obedience. That's part of being a manager. The third is discipline. That meant obedience, application, and energy on the part of the individual employee. And then the manager would warn, they would fine, and they would suspend people to enforce that discipline. Fourth, managers should pursue unity of command. In other words, an employee should receive orders from one supervisor only. I know that I used to be really confused in organizations when I worked in places where I felt like I had more than one boss, and it was really stressful. Number 5, unity of direction. That meant one head and one plan for a group of activities having the same direction. So everybody is pushing in the same direction. Number 6 is subordination of individual interest to general interest. That meant that you as an individual employee should put your personal interests aside and pursue the greater purpose.
So you tried learning a language, but the moment you try to speak it, your mind freezes up.
Number 7 is the remuneration of personnel. He thought people should be paid fairly and rewarded for what he called well-directed effort. In other words, if people are good workers, you should pay them fairly. Number 8 is centralization. Fail believed that it was up to the manager to figure out the right balance of that centralized decision-making versus decentralized or delegated decision-making and power. If an organization is really big, they're going to have to decentralize a little bit more, but if it's smaller, then they can keep most of the decision-making power. And it was up to the managers to figure that out in any given case. Number 9 is the scalar chain. We call it the chain of command. He called it the chain of superiors, where you would go up the chain and then cut across the organization somewhere and then down the chain of command to speak to somebody on the other side. Of course, Fayol believed in many cases it would be much more efficient to let people talk directly. And so as long as they're okay with the supervisors, he said that they could do that. Number 10 is order. That meant the right man in the right place. Of course, they all use the word man instead of people, to form an effective social order. So you had to put people in the right place to get the best out of everybody. Number 11 is equity. He had a desire for equity and the equality of treatment when dealing with people. He saw this as the right combination of kindliness and justice. Number 12, he believed in the stability of tenure and personnel. He wanted people to stay in their jobs when they were good at their jobs. He thought that was good for the organization. Number 13, initiative. Managers should encourage and inspire the initiative of employees. In other words, if you have a lot of lazy people hanging around, it partly is the manager's responsibility to make sure they're inspired and are taking initiative. And 14, esprit de corps. He wanted to establish unity and harmony in organizations, and he saw that as the manager's job. So like I mentioned, Fayol's book has a lot of lists in it, a lot of categories. And really that was his goal. It doesn't read like a narrative.
Drugi, menadžeri i elementi menadžmenta. Kako bi neki proizvodni proces bio uspješan, potrebno je njegovo što efikasnije vođenje. Menadžeri su zaduženi za upravljanje cjelokupnim proizvodnim procesom, što znači da moraju voditi računa o nizu različitih elemenata, poput strateškog planiranja i inoviranja, odabira, podučavanja i motiviranja potrebnih ljudskih resursa, kadrova, donošenja odluka i njihova prenošenja na niže razine itd. Upravljanje nekom tvrtkom ili proizvodnim procesom složen je posao koji zahtjeva mnoga znanja i vještine. O uspješnosti menadžera da pomoću elemenata ili funkcija upravljanja ostvari ciljeve tvrtke učinkovitom uporabom ograničenih resursa i održavanjem niske razine troškova ovisi i njezin opstanak na tržištu.
One of the keys to Apple is Apple's an incredibly collaborative company. And so, you know how many committees we have at Apple?
No.
0. We have no committees.
No committee.
We are organized like a startup. One person's in charge of iPhone OS software. One person's in charge of Mac hardware. One person's in charge of iPhone hardware engineering. Another person's in charge of worldwide marketing. Another person's in charge of operations. We're organized like a startup. We're the biggest startup on the planet. And we all meet for 3 hours once a week, and we talk about everything we're doing, the whole business. And there's tremendous teamwork at the top of the company, which filters down to tremendous teamwork throughout the company. And teamwork is dependent on trusting the other folks to come through with their part without watching them all the time, but trusting that they're going to come through with their parts. And that's what we do really well. And we're great at figuring out how to divide things up into these great teams that we have and all work on the same thing, touch bases frequently, and bring it all together into a product. We do that really well. And so what I do all day is meet with teams of people and work on ideas and solve problems to make new products, to make new marketing programs, whatever it is.
And are people willing to tell you you're wrong?
Yeah.
I mean, other than
snarky journalists. I mean, people that
Oh,
work for
yeah. No, we have wonderful arguments.
And do you win them all? Or?
Oh, no, I wish I did. No, see, you can't. If you want to hire great people and have them stay working for you, you have to let them make a lot of decisions, and you have to be run by ideas, not hierarchy. The best ideas have to win.
So,
otherwise, good people don't stay.
But you must be more than a facilitator who runs meetings. You obviously contribute your own ideas.
I contribute ideas, sure. Well, why would I be there if I didn't?
Menadžment ima 5 temeljnih funkcija. Prvi, planiranje, postavljanje ciljeva, vizija i misija za djelovanje u budućnosti. Drugi, organiziranje, povezivanje dijelova organizacije radi efikasnijega obavljanja poslova. Treći, motiviranje i vođenje, razvijanje i stvaranje timskoga duha i osobne motivacije svih dijelova organizacije i njezinih zaposlenika. Radnika, radi postizanja zajedničkoga cilja. Četvrti, kontroliranje, stvaranje sustava kontrole u izvršavanju postavljenih ciljeva radi trenutnog uočavanja problema i njihova što bržeg rješavanja. Peti, upravljanje ljudskim potencijalima, resursima, korištenje i upravljanje ljudskim znanjem i snagom kao glavnim čimbenikom u postizanju postavljenih ciljeva. Na primjer, odabir stručnih ljudi na određena mjesta u organizaciji, promaknuća zaslužnih i vrijednih radnika itd. Proces upravljanja proizvodnim procesom od najranijih je početaka hijerarhijski proces u kojem niže razine izvršavaju odluke donesene na višoj razini. Svaka razina također neposredno komunicira samo s najbližim razinama, iznad i ispod nje, umanjujući na taj način mogućnost prenošenja proturječnih informacija i naloga, što uvećava efikasnost cjelokupnog procesa. Hijerarhijski je način upravljanja proizvodnjom bio ključni čimbenik uspjeha ideje o masovnoj proizvodnji. To uključuje donošenje odluka na samome vrhu tvrtke, raspravu i operacionalizaciju. Način provedbe tih odluka s menadžerima zaduženima za različite sektore. Potom je te odluke trebalo prenijeti predradnicima, poslovođama, u proizvodnim odjelima. Oni su bili zaduženi za neposredni nadzor nad radnicima koji su provodili strateške odluke u djelo. Iz ovoga je primjera vidljivo kakva je uloga menadžmenta kao procesa u kojem se ispunjavaju ciljevi posredstvom rada drugih ljudi. Treći, globalizacija, informatizacija i budućnost menadžmenta. Hijerarhijsko je organiziranje upravljanja tvrtkom s procesom globalizacije potkraj 20. i početkom 21. stoljeća, sve prisutnije. U današnje doba događa se da uprava korporacije sa sjedištem, primjerice, u SAD-u prenosi ideje o potrebi proizvodnje nekoga dobra. Tenisica, igrački, lijekova ili kukuruza. Svojoj podružnici u zapadnoj Europi, koja potom odluku s razrađenim detaljima prenosi tvornici smještenoj u istočnoj Aziji. Jedan od primjera mrežnog odlučivanja u organizacijskom procesu predstavlja i Wikipedia. Globalna internetska mreža slična klasičnoj, tiskanoj enciklopediji, kojom se mogu koristiti svi kako bi dobili određene informacije, ali jednako tako svi mogu biti i autori dijelova Wikipedije. Kako bi se osigurala kvaliteta projekta, nekolicina je pojedinaca zadužena za kontrolu unesenih podataka, a problemi se rješavaju zajedničkim raspravljanjem u kojemu svatko može sudjelovati. Kako s godinama proizvodni procesi postaju sve složeniji, kako se pojedine tvrtke sve više specijaliziraju, a konkurencija postaje sve jača, stalna je potreba da se način rada u tvrtkama, pa tako i u menadžmentu, mijenja. Jedna od važnijih promjena tiče se i smanjenja uloge hijerarhijskog donošenja odluka u upravljačkom procesu kako bi se povećala fleksibilnost i omogućilo brzo rješavanje problema. Ta promjena u organizaciji rada tiče se prelaska s hijerarhijskog odlučivanja na mrežno odlučivanje. Mrežno odlučivanje moderan je način donošenja odluka u kompleksnim uvjetima, a temelji se na korištenju specijalističkog znanja članova neke organizacije. Odluke se donose nakon provedenih rasprava o kreativnom rješavanju problema, takozvani brainstorming, u kojima mogu sudjelovati mnogi članovi organizacije i u kojoj svi imaju jednaku mogućnost ponuditi prijedloge i očekivati da oni budu prihvaćeni. Iako i u organizacijama koje se temelje na mrežnome odlučivanju postoji hijerarhija, proces donošenja odluka od vrha prema dolje. Top-down proces nije karakterističan, već je puno češća situacija kada rješenja problema dolaze s različitih razina. Mrežna organizacija predstavlja suvremeni oblik poduzeća u kojem djeluje horizontalan odnos između dijelova poduzeća. Umjesto stroge hijerarhije kakva je prevladavala ranije, mrežnoj organizaciji svojstvena je horizontalna sinkroniziranost rada koja je fleksibilna i lako prilagodljiva različitim zahtjevima. Mrežna organizacija tipičan je oblik povezivanja i djelovanja organizacija suvremenog informacijskog društva. Jer se tvrtke sve više povezuju kao skladne umrežene računalno integrirane organizacije. Pitanja za provjeru znanja. Prvi. Što je menadžment? Koje su ključne funkcije menadžmenta? Drugi. Na koji se način proces odlučivanja ustrojava hijerarhijski? Treći. Koja je ključna razlika između hijerarhijskog i mrežnog odlučivanja? Četvrti. Koja je ključna uloga menadžera? Peti. Kolika je važnost brainstorminga u današnjem kompleksnom društvu?